It's one of the most divisive convictions in British history.
She's as guilty as they can be.
You're sure of that?
Yes.
A nurse jailed for murdering babies in her care.
One more time, what do we agree?
Lucy Letby must be free!
She's in that prison, being sentenced for the rest of her life, is an innocent woman.
Serious concerns have been raised about the Lucy Letby case.
It's highly likely that what we're witnessing is a major miscarriage of justice.
A panel of international experts says no crimes were committed.
In summary, ladies and gentlemen, we did not find any murders.
But Panorama's found problems with the new defence evidence too.
When the doctor performed the aspiration of the abdomen, the needle perforated the liver.
The nation heard that a doctor had killed a baby with a needle, and it's not plausible.
And Letby's original defence expert says these flaws are jeopardising her case.
It seems to me that there's a real danger that the flaws will be seen, and we find ourselves no further down the road in trying to get justice.
So who should we believe about Lucy Letby?
A nurse who worked at a hospital in Chester has been found guilty of murdering babies in her care.
This is the day Lucy Letby was labelled a monster.
Lucy Letby was entrusted to protect some of the most vulnerable babies. Little did those working alongside her know that there was a murderer in their midst.
She's been convicted of unimaginable crimes, the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 7 more.
It makes her the most prolific killer of children in modern times here in the UK.
At the time of Lucy Letby's convictions, the world seemed convinced she was guilty. We interviewed one person who wasn't.
I've grown up with Lucy, and not a single thing that I've ever seen or witnessed of Lucy would, you know, let me for a moment believe that she was capable of the things she was being accused of.
Back then, Lucy Letby's friend was a lonely voice. She isn't now.
One more time, what do we agree?
Lucy Letby must be free!
And I'm a doctor who is
The campaign to free her grows louder by the day.
Literally within days of the first verdict, I had really serious doubts.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Bronzefield Prison?
It's here, yeah.
Okay.
Britain's largest women's prison. You wouldn't know it was here. It's just tucked away off the road.
I've spent almost 3 years investigating the Lucy Letby case with my colleague Jonathan Coffey. This is the 3rd Panorama programme we've made. We've written a book about the case too.
So this is where Lucy Letby is imprisoned. And if she's guilty, many people will say this is where she belongs. Some will say it's too good for her, you know, it's not the worst prison. And if she's not, it's just a horrendous miscarriage of justice. A woman in her mid-30s, locked up wrongly.
Those are the 2 extremes.
One of them's wrong. I mean, it's...
Yeah, they can't both be right.
And we're still arguing about the evidence 2 years after her convictions.
So we're in my chambers, which is Furnival Chambers.
The fact so many people are now questioning Lucy Letby's convictions is partly down to this man, her new barrister.
Down to the basement, which is where they keep all the pigeonholes and drawers of all our post. I get quite a lot of post in relation to Lucy, almost on a daily basis.
Mark MacDonald's been working unpaid on the case for almost a year. His mission is to get Letby out of jail.
These are messages for Lucy. I've received hundreds of letters and hundreds of emails that come in and say, how can I help you?
Will you show them to her?
I will tell her, and I will let her know that letters have arrived for her, books have arrived for her. And when she is released, she will have them all. Every single one of them.
Letby has already tried and failed to appeal her convictions. Her last hope is the Criminal Cases Review Commission, or CCRC. It can ask the Court of Appeal to take another look, to re-examine her convictions for attacking premature babies in the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital.
So let's remind ourselves what Lucy Letby has been convicted of doing. Air embolism, injecting air into baby circulation, air in the stomach, trauma, inflicting trauma, insulin poisoning, dislodging breathing tubes. I mean, they're the key ones. Have I missed anything out?
Oh, overfeeding.
Overfeeding. There's so many different allegations and no direct evidence for any of them. I mean, no one saw her do that, or that.
I hear you. No one saw her. It's circumstantial. There are so many cases built on circumstantial evidence. It doesn't mean it's lesser evidence.
My name is Shu Li, and I'm here to share with you the findings of the International Expert Panel on the Lucy Letby case.
An international panel of 14 unpaid experts has been assembled for Lucy Letby's defence. They've looked at the medical evidence and reached a unanimous conclusion.
Death or injury of all the affected infants were due either to natural causes or to errors in medical care. In summary, ladies and gentlemen, we did not find any murders.
It's often said that a barrister shouldn't say that their client is innocent, that there's reasonable doubt. But in this case, it's wholly unusual because every expert that's looked at this case, instructed by the defence, have said there was no crime. Which means if there's no crime, there is an innocent woman in prison.
This is the man Letby's supporters blame, the prosecution's main expert witness.
I read a piece in The Guardian about Cheshire Police investigating a number of baby deaths in Chester Hospital. So I simply mentioned that this sounded like my kind of case.
In 2017, retired paediatrician Dewi Evans offered to work on the investigation. He drove to Chester and the police showed him the medical notes of one baby.
My concerns were pretty rapid, within a matter of minutes, really. It struck me that this baby was the victim of significant inflicted injury, and that we were already looking at some kind of criminal event.
He walks in to a meeting where he's given a set of notes and he looks at them, and whilst he's drinking his coffee, within 10 minutes he knew what the pathologist didn't know, what the treating clinicians didn't know, what a plethora of reviews that had taken place on this hospital didn't know. He knew within 10 minutes whilst drinking his coffee that this was an unlawful act against this child that had led to the death of this child.
For the next 5 years, Dr. Evans was at the heart of the police investigation.
What I discovered was that there were many deaths, 7 of them, where there were grounds for thinking that they were due to inflicted injury. It was not my evidence alone. There was evidence from local nurses and the local doctors and the other independent witnesses. And this led to the conviction, which in my opinion is absolutely safe.
How is it possible for other medics to look at the same material and say there's no evidence of deliberate harm?
That's a question for them. And it may be that perhaps they don't know as much as they think they do.
One of the main critics of the prosecution's case is Lucy Letby's original defence expert. He's a neonatologist who attended court throughout the 10-month-long trial. My colleague Jonathan has been discussing the evidence with him over the past 2 years.
Dr. Hall.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, good to see you.
Mike Hall says the prosecution evidence simply doesn't stack up.
My opinion is that the jury was not given accurate information about the state of health of the babies prior to their collapse. They were showing signs of being unwell. In terms of the summary reports of the expert panel, the bottom line is that I agree with them that there is no evidence of inflicted injury in the babies.
One of the clearest problems with the prosecution evidence involves baby C. He died at just 4 days old. Lucy Letby was alone with him when he collapsed.
What went wrong with the prosecution's case on baby C, in your view?
Some of what they said was medically incompetent, actually. And it is my opinion that the basis in which Lucy Letby was convicted with regard to baby C is seriously flawed.
The prosecution said Letby killed baby C by injecting air into his stomach.
In several of the cases in the trial, babies collapsed, and when the abdomen was x-rayed, had huge amounts of gas, and if that happens, that pushes up on the diaphragms and makes it very difficult for babies to take a breath, and eventually babies will stop breathing because they just can't take a breath in.
But there was a problem. An important piece of evidence was an X-ray showing air in baby C's stomach, taken 41 hours before he died.
The prosecution's experts said it was suspicious, but it turned out Lucy Letby wasn't on duty that day.
The jury was told this before they found Letby guilty. But there was another problem. The main prosecution expert has changed his mind about baby C's death. In one of his pre-trial reports, Dewi Evans said we may never know the cause, as the baby was at great risk of unexpected collapse. The first time he said air injected into the stomach caused the baby's death was in the witness box. Under cross-examination, he also suggested another possible cause of death: air injected intravenously into the blood. This was all explained to the jury. The prosecution barrister even told them they could disregard Dr. Evans' evidence on baby C. After the trial, Dr. Evans wrote another report. Air in the blood was now the most likely cause.
He's changed his mind on one of the murder cases, to which he says, actually, this is not how the baby died. I'll tell you what, I'm going to write a new report. Writes a new report a year after she's convicted, and gives it to the police. And here's the issue here. If he's changing his mind, if he is questioning what he is saying, undermining his evidence that he gives at trial, what else is there to say about him and his other evidence at trial?
This changing of position between different possible causes is leading to people arguing that the whole thing is flawed. Can you see that?
My opinion was that this baby was the victim of inflicted injury, and whether this was air into the stomach or air into the bloodstream or a combination of both, they all represent deliberate harm.
But if you can't be certain of which of those two causes...
Does that matter?
Well, there are many who say it does.
It does not. Both reflect inflicted injury, deliberate harm. In other words, murder.
It's not like you had a situation where you were saying, this person was shot, actually, sorry, no, there's no gunshot wounds at all. I've decided instead they drowned. That's not what we're dealing with here. He's looking
Some people
at...
would say that's exactly what we're dealing with
I know
here.
they would, but I don't think that's how it came over.
Air into the stomach and air into the bloodstream are very different things. And to just slide from one theory to the other, I think makes it sound like you don't really know what happened.
It's certainly a really difficult case to get your head around.
Well, some people would say it's not a difficult case to get your head around, that actually they have got their head around it, and the prosecution expert evidence is all over the place.
Yeah, and other people would say they got their head around it and convicted her. The jury got their head around it to the extent that they convicted her.
When it comes to the Letby case, there are two parallel worlds. One where the evidence and her guilt are fiercely disputed, and another where her convictions are written in stone.
There has been a huge outpouring of comment from a variety of quarters on the validity of the convictions.
A public inquiry is investigating the hospital where Lucy Letby worked. It takes her guilt as beyond question.
All of this noise has caused enormous additional distress to the parents who have already suffered far too much.
The families have spoken out.
The media PR campaign, aimed to garner public sympathy for Letby, demonstrates a complete lack of understanding for Letby's crimes and the complexity of the case.
Family G now have to avoid watching the television, reading newspapers, and accessing social media to protect themselves from the mostly inaccurate and often biased and toxic messages that are being reported and published.
Certain pieces of evidence being discussed in the media are grossly out of context and misrepresented. We would like to say, shame on you all.
Going to the House of Commons. So we're going to meet David Davis MP, who has, from almost the beginning, been raising concerns about Lucy Letby. And this is really an update as to where I am on the case. Thank you.
There's now an army of experts publicly supporting Letby's case.
Hi, I have a meeting with David Davis, MP.
But at her trial, Lucy Letby's defence didn't call a single medical expert to give evidence. It's why many people think her conviction was unfair.
Well, when I found out that I wasn't going to be called to give evidence, or indeed that nobody else was going to be called to give evidence, I couldn't believe it, because I could not see how a fair process could possibly occur without some rebuttal of the evidence, particularly the medical evidence, which had been provided to the jury.
Were you given a reason?
No, I wasn't.
Do you think Lucy Letby is innocent?
I don't know whether Lucy Letby is innocent, but in terms of natural justice, I don't think that she should have been found guilty.
Do you believe any of the allegations against Lucy Letby stack up?
We conclude that there are very, very plausible alternative explanations, and that the accusations of wrongdoing that have been put towards the jury simply don't stack up. It's highly likely that what we're witnessing is a major miscarriage of justice.
But are the new defence experts right?
Every case I've seen presented by Mark MacDonald and his international panel contains information that is frankly inaccurate. It's wrong. He's done no favours to his client at all. Any competent barrister would be able to dismantle, unravel the conclusions that the international panel reached.
What's surprising is that Letby's original defence expert partly agrees. He's not part of the international panel, and he believes there are problems with its reports.
I think there are some significant flaws in the reports. For a number of the babies, I think they are important, really. And I think a problem is that it could lead to misunderstanding on the part of people who don't have experience in this area of medicine.
Take baby A. Letby's international panel says he died from a blood clot after inheriting a rare condition from his mother. But there's little evidence to support that claim.
The international panel says the baby died of a clot in the artery that supplies the back of the brain. This is erroneous. There was no evidence found on autopsy at all, and they claim that this may be overlooked, which is really pushing the limits of credibility.
The possibility that the mother's condition had in some way caused the babies to collapse was explored at the trial, and the jury were offered that option of an explanation, and obviously they rejected that, and I'm not sure that the expert witnesses have added anything to that conversation.
Then there's baby I. Letby's experts say she died in part because of a bug that doctors failed to treat. Once again, Letby's original defence expert says the evidence isn't there.
The information of which I'm aware relating to this bug, that it was last found, identified, about 6 weeks before baby I sadly died. And it wasn't identified in the post-mortem report. And so the information which I have about this bug doesn't lead me to the conclusion that it was a significant cause in the events leading to the baby's death.
Do you have an opinion on Mark MacDonald's approach?
It seems to me that there's a real danger it will rebound.
In what way?
In that the flaws will be seen. And we find ourselves no further down the road in trying to get justice, or at least a fair trial.
Do you accept there are any flaws in any of the reports your experts have written?
No. Do do I accept that there are flaws? No, I don't. I got the best in the world. I got the best in the world. Compared to the evidence that was called at the trial, this is mountains above them and their skill set.
It's amazing, isn't it, the degree to which different opinions, different expert opinions, will turn the tide of a case.
But I think that's terrifying, because your fate hangs on which experts are on your side and which experts are on the prosecution side. That's no way to create confidence in the outcome of criminal trials that are heavily dependent on expert witnesses.
Letby's new experts do have serious arguments. There is one challenge that could, if true, really undermine the prosecution case. Lucy Letby was convicted of injecting air into baby's blood, causing a blockage in the circulation. It's called an air embolism. Lucy Letby was convicted of murdering 7 babies, and the prosecution argued up to 6 of those attacks involved air embolism. So what was the evidence that convicted her?
The babies that collapsed or died of air embolism were babies that were stable beforehand, showing no signs of illness, and then underwent a sudden and catastrophic collapse. And how do you explain that? Why did this baby collapse and then have air where it shouldn't have had air after death? So having crossed off all the likely things, you then have to look at unlikely and rare and unthinkable things like air embolus.
During the trial, the prosecution relied on this academic paper examining air embolism in babies. One of the symptoms it found was unusual skin rashes. The prosecution said some of the babies in Letby's care showed similar rashes. Now, the expert who wrote that scientific paper is campaigning for Lucy Letby's release.
The notion that these babies can be diagnosed with air embolism because they collapsed and had these skin discolorations has no evidence in fact.
The expert panel says there are no reported cases of skin rashes where newborn babies have had air injected into their veins.
The prosecution's allegations put forward some highly speculative, in the case of air embolism, highly speculative suggestions. Why jump onto an allegation of air embolism when other more plausible explanations exist?
If Lucy Letby's new experts are right about air embolism, they will have undermined key evidence in 6 out of the 7 murder cases. But that might not get her out of jail. The judge told the jury that if they were convinced Letby was guilty of one offence, they could use that to support a conviction on other charges.
It's a direction that judges regularly give to juries throughout the country every day. And basically what it means in layman's terms is that if a jury comes to a secure conclusion in respect of one of the allegations that a defendant has done something in a certain way, then that evidence can be used as some support for the prosecution's case in respect of the other allegations.
So what was the other medical evidence that convinced the jury that Lucy Letby is a killer?
The jury was unanimous in just 3 cases. The question of whether she really is a killer may depend heavily on how strong the evidence is in those 3 cases.
One of the 3 is baby O. He died in June 2016, in part from liver injuries. The prosecution argued Lucy Letby assaulted him.
At post-mortem, that baby had blood under the surface of the liver. The pathologist said he only sees that in cases of major trauma, blunt force trauma, the like of a road traffic accident. So his conclusion was that this was blunt force trauma.
The pathologist's evidence seems to have convinced the jury. But was it right? We've spoken to a paediatric pathologist who wasn't involved in the case, but has seen Baby O's post-mortem report.
It's Jonathan from Panorama here. I hope you don't mind my calling, but I just wanted to...
They don't want to be identified, but they don't think Baby O's liver injuries were caused by an impact injury.
Based on the evidence I've seen, I think it's unlikely that these injuries are trauma caused by impact. You can't completely rule out the possibility, but in my view, the location of the injuries and the condition of the liver tissue itself don't fit with that explanation.
So the injuries themselves don't look to you to be impact-type injuries?
No, they don't. No, not from my experience.
So if the prosecution was wrong about Baby O's liver injuries, why did he die?
Can I hand over to Richard Taylor, who's going to deal with those reports? Can you come up here? Is that okay?
Mark MacDonald's experts claimed they had the answer.
My name's Richard Taylor. I'm a neonatologist from Victoria, British Columbia in Canada.
Dr. Richard Taylor said Baby O had died because during resuscitation, a doctor accidentally pierced his liver with a needle.
When the doctor performed the aspiration of the abdomen, the needle perforated the liver. The baby was still being ventilated with a needle in the liver. The liver was now being lacerated by the needle.
What was the name of the doctor? I don't think it's right that we name names at this stage.
I think the doctor knows who they are. I know. I have to say, from a personal point of view, that if this had happened to me, I'd be unable to sleep at night, knowing that what I had done had led to the death of the baby, and now there is a nurse in jail convicted of murder.
The doctor accused of accidentally causing the baby's death has since been publicly identified as Steve Breary, one of the consultants who first suspected Letby of murder. Do you believe that Lucy Letby is guilty?
Yes. It's beyond my reasonable doubt that she's done these things.
Dr. Breary told us he couldn't comment because of ongoing investigations and inquiries. The possibility he pierced Baby O's liver with a needle was considered at Letby's trial and rejected by the jury.
At the trial, the pathologist said that he had looked for this carefully, for evidence of the liver having been perforated, and he said that he found no evidence that the liver had been perforated while Baby O was alive.
The paediatric pathologist we've been speaking to also says the post-mortem evidence doesn't support the needle theory.
These injuries weren't caused by a needle. They were in different parts of the liver, and there was no sign of any needle injury on the liver.
So the post-mortem evidence just doesn't support the claim that a needle punctured this baby's liver?
No, it doesn't fit.
Even if the needle had punctured the baby's liver, it can't explain why he collapsed in the first place or why he died.
At the time it was inserted, the baby sadly was at death's door. So whatever the needle did or didn't do does not explain why the baby had collapsed and why resuscitation was unsuccessful.
The nation heard that a doctor had killed a baby with a needle, a baby that Lucy Letby had been accused of murdering, by jabbing a needle into the liver, and it's not plausible based on the evidence that we've been hearing.
Yeah, they heard, you know, a doctor's responsible. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if it had been me.
What a moment! What a bombshell of a claim.
Dr. Taylor declined to be interviewed for this programme. He told us that while the needle may not have been the primary cause of death, his opinion had not substantially changed. He said the needle probably penetrated the liver of baby O and probably accelerated his demise.
Hi.
Hello.
Dr. Ayton.
Hi.
It's really good to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
In fact, Dr. Taylor's comments were based on a report written by 2 other unpaid defence experts. One of them says he's examined the evidence independently and believes baby O's liver injuries were caused by inappropriate resuscitation attempts. But he says it's fairly clear the doctor did pierce the liver with a needle.
Baby O had a very prolonged and difficult resuscitation. The lungs of baby O were being massively hyperinflated, and that this was pushing the diaphragm down, and that this was pushing the liver into the position where it could be hit by a needle.
We've spoken to other experts, including another pathologist, who've examined the case of baby O and who say it's implausible to conclude that a needle pierced the liver.
I think here there are 2 possibilities. One is that the liver capsule was ruptured by the needle, or one is that the liver capsule ruptured spontaneously. The liver capsule was ruptured. I don't think, crucially, for me, it's not important which of those it is. It happened. And the reason it happened was down to the sequence of events which happened during the resuscitation.
Your colleague, Dr. Richard Taylor, said about the doctor who inserted the needle, I'd be unable to sleep at night, knowing that what I'd done had led to the death of a baby. Do you agree with him?
My role here is to present the evidence in my report, and I think people can come to their own judgments about what Dr. Richard Taylor said. I mean, that's essentially an interpretation of the evidence which I have presented.
Dr. Taylor was wrong to have put it that way?
I'm not making any comment about it. You know, it's up to him how he discusses something. You know, I stand or fall by what's written in my report, and I hope that that will be taken into account within the judicial process.
Since that press conference, other experts working for Letby have put forward yet another theory for baby O's death. A traumatic birth caused the liver injuries.
A very plausible cause, one of the highest, most likely causes, are the shearing stresses that occur during the time of delivery. And that means delivery where a baby has been pulled.
But once again, Letby's original defence expert says the theory is unfounded. Baby O was born by caesarean section in good condition.
Is there any evidence that baby O suffered birth trauma?
There was no reported evidence of birth trauma in baby O.
That's quite a fundamental problem, isn't it, with their analysis of baby O?
I think that is a fundamental problem with their analysis.
aren't you really speculating? If the available clinical notes say that a baby is born in great health and there is no reported evidence of birth trauma, how can birth trauma stand as a theory for what happened to that baby?
It's not implausible, it's highly plausible. And therefore, there should have been a much more detailed investigation of the circumstances of the delivery, and that, to our best knowledge, was not part of the police investigation.
It looks as though, even amongst those of you working with Lucy Letby's new defence team, there are differences of opinion.
And I think that's only natural. You know, you put a crowd of doctors in a room, you will get different opinions about things. Are there medical causes which explain why baby O died? The answer to that is yes. Was there any evidence of deliberate harm? No. And I think I am in agreement with the panel about that.
For the jury, baby O was one of the clearest cases that proved Lucy Letby was a killer. And yet, there appears to be flawed expert evidence on both sides. So what about the other two cases where the jury returned unanimous verdicts?
For many of those who are sure Lucy Letby's guilty, the strongest evidence comes from two other cases, the ones involving insulin. The prosecution argued that they showed someone at the Countess of Chester Hospital was deliberately poisoning babies. Once you accept that, they said, the other allegations are easier to accept too.
This time, the evidence comes from a lab test on a blood sample. It works by measuring insulin and a substance called C-peptide. When insulin's produced naturally by the body, you'd expect to find 5 to 10 times as much C-peptide. John Gregory's an expert on insulin in babies. He's not involved with the prosecution or defence.
When you measure insulin, if you don't find any C-peptide, that implies that the insulin has come from outside the body, perhaps in the form of an injection, for example.
What would you conclude where a baby has low blood sugar, where the baby's insulin level is in the thousands, and where the baby's C-peptide is low or unmeasurable?
I would conclude that the baby has had insulin administered somehow or other.
That's what was found in 2 of the babies Letby was convicted of harming. The first insulin case was baby F in August 2015. The second was baby L 8 months later. Baby L's recorded insulin levels were high, 1,099 picomoles per litre. If it was natural, you'd expect 5 to 10 times as much C-peptide, but the level was just 264. The ratio was even more extreme with baby F. His recorded insulin level was a sky-high 4,657, and his C-peptide was less than 169. The prosecution argued that the baby's intravenous feed bags had been deliberately spiked with insulin.
How important is the insulin evidence in the case?
The prosecution referred to it as a smoking gun because, of course, there was no other direct evidence. There's no one who had seen Lucy do anything, so they relied upon a blood result that had been found years later.
The expert panel says the insulin test, called an immunoassay, isn't reliable, and the sample should have been checked using other methods.
It actually has the highest error rate than any other biochemistry results we produce. Without verification and thorough verification, it must never be interpreted at face value.
It's true that the immunoassay test can make mistakes. But even Letby's experts accept it's accurate around 98% of the time.
You ran a lab, an NHS lab, for 30 years. Did you use immunoassays?
Extensively.
So the test must be useful.
The test is useful in the majority of cases, but we have to verify it. In Lucy Letby's case, the results are not verified, not checked, and therefore, in my opinion, it is completely worthless.
Even if the tests are accurate, Letby's experts say they may not prove the babies were poisoned. Their report's based on the idea that when it comes to insulin, premature babies are different, and that the insulin to C-peptide ratio for babies F and L were within the expected range for preterm infants. It relies on the work of a mechanical engineer who carries out biomedical research. He says he has research that shows there's a natural explanation for high levels of insulin and low levels of C-peptide in premature babies.
Preterm infants in these studies have these antibodies that can bind to insulin and effectively store it. It acts like a bank account, and it stores it in the body and doesn't clear.
For baby F, the C-peptide is less than 169. The insulin is over 4,500. It says in this report that that is within the expected range for preterm infants. Is that accurate?
It is not the best word choice, to be direct. We would say the word is not uncommon.
Is it normal?
There is no definition of normal for preterm neonate. Because nobody measures these infants regularly, nobody knows what normal is.
But the experts we've spoken to say the insulin to C-peptide ratio is extraordinary, and the baby's dangerously low blood sugar levels is further evidence the insulin wasn't natural.
Is there any plausible scenario in which those levels of insulin could have been naturally produced by the baby?
I can't think of any plausible explanation for such high insulin levels. I think finding insulin concentrations of that order in a newborn baby is exceedingly unlikely to have arisen from naturally produced insulin, and the absence of significant C-peptide simply underlines that point.
Pretty much everyone that we ask about this says that that ratio is extraordinary. You say that they're wrong.
No, I'm actually not saying that they're wrong. What I'm saying is that it is possible. I would say that it is unusual, it's unusually high. It is possible.
If Lucy Letby's expert is right and premature babies are different, it could unravel the prosecution case. But the medical specialists we've spoken to are baffled by his claims, and the defence won't share his research with us.
Look, it'd be very easy for me to say, look, here's what we report, but I'm not going to do that because it's not the place to litigate that on a TV programme.
These claims were made in front of the media at a press conference.
I know. Yes, I had a press conference. I wanted the general public to know. And that's why now you will not find the front page of any newspaper that use the descriptive term of Lucy Letby as evil.
I remember in the trial the prosecution saying to the jury, the insulin evidence is the strongest bit of evidence in the case. And when you look at the way the jury returned their verdicts, first of all, they came back first with the insulin babies.
I think where we net out is that the insulin evidence is not perfect, but it remains very strong, and it remains the strongest evidence in the case.
Lucy Letby's supporters aren't just challenging the science. They've also got new evidence about witness testimony that helped to convict her. It involves baby Kay. Letby was convicted at a retrial of attempting to murder her. The key evidence came from a consultant.
That is a night that is etched on my memory and will be in my nightmares forever.
Dr. Ravi Jayaram said he was worried when Lucy Letby was left alone with the baby.
Part of me was saying, you better go in and just check everything's okay, because you know what's happened before when Lucy's been on duty.
He says he discovered her standing by an incubator. The baby's breathing tube had come out, and she was doing nothing to help.
She was just standing there. The only possibility was that that tube had to have been dislodged deliberately.
But an email has emerged that tells a different story. It was written by Dr. Jayaram in 2017 and says Letby was at the incubator and called to inform him about the baby's low oxygen levels.
This was a completely different story told to the jury, so much so that there's now been a letter gone into the Cheshire Police and saying, well, we think you should investigate this for perjury.
And how important a part of your case to the CCRC will this be?
It's there, it's at the top. Because he was one of the main doctors that gave evidence during the whole of this trial.
We asked Dr. Jayaram about the email, and he didn't respond. But technically, it's not new evidence. Letby's previous defence team was given the email before she tried to appeal against her conviction for baby Kay. They just didn't raise it.
It probably isn't the email that will get her out of jail, but for anyone who is looking for confidence in the process that has put Lucy Letby in jail, an email like this just is quite shattering.
I'm so frustrated that it's not something that was aired at the trial and put to him, or even that we can put to him now. I mean, we've tried, we've approached him, and he won't engage.
In June, the news broke that 3 senior hospital managers had been arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The police have also been investigating further incidents involving Lucy Letby.
What's happening now is that they've got to the stage of passing a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service. So it's now up to the CPS to consider whether it meets the bar, whether it hits the bar for charges.
The current police investigation involves a second hospital. In 2012 and 2015, Letby trained briefly at Liverpool Women's Hospital. A hospital review looked at unplanned extubations, that's breathing tubes coming out unexpectedly. The Thirlwall inquiry heard that breathing tubes generally became dislodged on less than 1% of shifts at the Liverpool Hospital, but on 40% of shifts that Lucy Letby worked. Critics say the figures aren't credible, and there are any number of reasons why breathing tubes could become dislodged more often. We've looked into the review. Here's what we understand. Liverpool Women's Hospital went back to review the records of what are called ventilated shifts. These aren't working shifts. They're a 12-hour period where a baby's been on a breathing tube. The review found that for every 100 ventilated shifts where Lucy Letby wasn't involved in the care of a baby, tubes came out unexpectedly in less than 1. The same review looked at ventilated shifts in 2015 where Lucy Letby was involved in the care of a baby. It found there were 11, and that tubes came out during 4 of those ventilated shifts. That's 36%. We also understand breathing tubes came out during ventilated shifts involving Lucy Letby in 2012. We don't have the figures, but understand it happened much less often than in 2015.
It's something they measure, right? It's not just a chance bit of data. This is a really highly monitored thing.
I was speaking to someone who understands this data, and I said, how bad would she have to have been as a nurse for this to be accidental? And the answer was spectacularly bad. Either she is spectacularly bad or acting maliciously. That was the answer that came back.
So standing back from this, it's what it might say about the longer term, the bigger picture.
So we're going to the prison where Lucy Letby is being kept and held.
When's the last time you saw her?
I think actually it was about 6 weeks. I generally try and talk to her once a week on the phone. She'll ring me and we'll have a conversation.
Letby's defence haven't seen the details of the hospital's ventilated shifts review.
I think it's a complete load of rubbish. Where's the evidence?
If it were true, it would be pretty alarming, wouldn't it?
What do you mean if it were true? It's you know, show the evidence. Show the evidence. This was a bold assertion, and as far as I can see, no evidential basis to it whatsoever. If I'm wrong, I'll be corrected. If there is something, then show us.
The stakes couldn't be higher. Depending on which experts are believed, Letby could spend the rest of her life in prison or be set free. She's a monster or a victim.
If Lucy Letby's lawyer is successful, this is where her case will end up at the Court of Appeal. And that's when the expert evidence on both sides of this debate will face a true reckoning.
There's no end in sight to the arguments about Lucy Letby's guilt. No end to the disputes about why 14 babies collapsed and 7 of them died. No end to the suffering of their parents.
She's in that prison, being sentenced for the rest of her life, is an innocent woman. She will one day be free. The only question is when.
You don't worry
No.
that you may have put an innocent woman in jail?
Good God, no. No. She's as guilty as they can be.
You're sure of that?
Yes.
A jury found Lucy Letby guilty of unimaginable crimes. Now that certainty is being undermined by the fierce disputes about the evidence that convicted her.